thumbs up, thumbs down is such an arbitrary thing anyway.
Not arbitrary.
Welcome to Back at the Movies, the podcast where we revisit our favorite Siskel and Ebert episodes.
I'm really surprised at you. You should be ashamed of yourself.
What,
First of all,
for not agreeing with you? I've never been ashamed of that. I've been proud of that.
I'm your co-host, Dylan Wilcox, a movie buff who went from selling popcorn at the local movie theater to working in Hollywood.
And I'm your co-host, Miranda Broder, an English and film teacher living in the Bay Area. We've experienced so many movies together throughout the years, and so many discoveries were thanks to Siskel and Ebert.
I loved it. I really did love it.
We'll be reviewing the movies and the reviewers, discussing if the films hold up and if their opinions hold up, as we hope to discover and rediscover some gems along the way.
This is Back at the Movies, and the balcony is open.
Thank you for being here.
Okay, our first movie is The Fugitive. August 1993. Late for a big summer movie, August, but it was a huge hit. It was, I didn't realize this, 6 weeks at number one. And it was the third highest grossing movie of the year, almost $400 million worldwide. One of the few big Hollywood action movies to cross over into some awards and Oscar love and a bunch of critical acclaim. It got 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, and Tommy Lee Jones won for Best Supporting Actor. I remember he was up against Leonardo DiCaprio from Gilbert Grape, which we talked about, and I always was rooting for Leo.
Yeah.
Anyway, huge hit, both commercially and with critics, and here's Ebert talking about it in clip 1.
Reviewing The Fugitive, it might be a good idea to cut straight to the chase, so to speak, and say that this is one of the year's best action films, a virtuoso effort that runs more than 2 hours and doesn't have a single moment without tension and excitement. It's the best of all the summer thrillers. The movie stars Harrison Ford as a prominent Chicago surgeon whose wife is brutally murdered. He is crushed and angered when he realizes that the police think that he did it.
It was, of course, based on a TV show that was from 1963 to 1967. It actually won Best Drama Series one year.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen this since the theater. And let's hear Ebert talk about how much he loves it more, and then we'll talk a little bit more about our thoughts in clip 2.
Okay.
The Fugitive was directed by Andy Davis, who also made last year's Under Siege and now ranks as one of the top action directors at work today. He knows that a good thriller needs a good villain, and for the second movie in a row, he's turned to Tommy Lee Jones, this time in a more complex performance. We don't like him as the movie opens, but he grows on us, and by the end of the movie, it's a little different kind of role for Tommy Lee Jones. Meanwhile, Harrison Ford once again is perfectly cast as a dogged everyman who rises to the occasion and stubbornly fights for his rights. The Fugitive is based on the TV series that had an almost fanatical following, and one of the interesting things about this movie is the way it keeps the allegorical quality of the original show while grounding all of the dialogue and action in convincing everyday details. As far as action movies go, they don't get much better than that.
A resounding rave. This was the same summer as Jurassic Park, so it was a pretty strong summer for action movies in 1993.
For sure.
I saw this opening night.
Okay.
I did not like it, and I couldn't remember why, but there was a specific reason. So I hadn't seen it since then. And as we started rewatching it, I was actually really excited to rewatch it because I know everyone loves it. And I was like, why didn't I like it? And as we started it, I remembered there was a big sound issue and they had to stop the movie, I think during the train sequence. And so that kind of colored my perception. And I thought it was great. I loved this rewatch. I liked it so much better. What did you think, Miranda?
Well, when I first saw it, I don't remember the day I saw it, but I do remember hearing good things about the special effects, especially the train crash scene.
Yes, that was a huge...
Yeah, that was really talked about at the time. I got my daughter to watch it with me because it's kind of one of those movies that she would she likes. We sat and we watched it, and it was pretty good. Like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's, I mean, if you like those kinds of films, it's a good film. Like, it's a good action film. It definitely keeps you in suspense the whole way. And, you know, it has some fun cameos like Jane Lynch and...
I know, Jane Lynch!
Yeah!
That was so
Julianne
exciting.
Moore, too. I didn't expect to see Julianne Moore because I don't think at the time she had done much. So
no, I think she had just
that.
done like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Okay. When I
saw her name in the credits, I was like, you're right. Shortcuts was that same year, so it might have come out a little bit after.
So we had seen her vagina for, you know, a long time.
Yes, or we were about to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But no, so that was kind of fun to see them. And I don't know, it's I feel like I can't judge this type of movie because I always get bored in action films.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think
like,
even
oh my
if you
God,
don't like action movies, that you would like this movie.
But it's the reason why I liked it better than most action films is that it wasn't just car chases and train crashes and stuff. It actually did have some more intricate plot details that were kind of interesting.
Yes,
like
and it
constantly is, you know, avoiding getting arrested, you know, like in every turn. Some of it just felt a little unrealistic, obviously. You know, whenever I get in my head when I'm watching a movie, that makes me think I don't like the movie that much because then I'm thinking of all the ways in which the editing wasn't right. Like he dyes his hair black at one point, and then like the very next scene, his hair is back to Harrison Ford glossy deliciousness.
Well, he totally evolves into Harrison Ford by the end of the movie. It's pretty funny.
Yes, like he had that beard. He was kind of beardo for a while, and then like, thank God he shaved it because
it was also thank God he had the beard in the first place, so he could do something with his face.
What do you mean?
I mean, I was like, it's a good thing that he can change his physical appearance more by shaving, because if he didn't have that, then it would have been harder to disguise himself.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
I agree. It's a little preposterous, but I'm okay with that because it has the courage of its convictions to tell a really fun story, and I think it's moved so quickly that you don't really care. Siskel also talked about this in his thumbs up in the next clip 3.
I thought it was very good too, Roger, and I'm going to take it on a more personal way that I think it's so good.
Okay.
You have situations here, a lot of them, where he comes very close to being caught. And
he's always just one step ahead of them.
Yes, and it keeps happening. I don't know how many times, but I would say at least 6 times he enters the nest of the police that can catch him and put him back in prison and kill him, perhaps. And I love the way that's done because frequently, if it's not done well, it could be corny, not believable, and all this. And it's exciting to have yourself fooled into accepting the situation. I mean, they pass in a stairwell, and he's not caught. And in I don't know how many other movies I would have said that's a baloney.
You would have said it was manipulative.
Yes,
and it is.
He says, I'm going to make this personal, and I thought he was going to tell a personal anecdote about how he was on the run from Tommy Lee Jones or something, but no, he's just talking about the movie. So I was like, okay.
I didn't really get that personal.
No.
Wow, that was personal.
That was really personal, the way he said about how he keeps evading the law. It does happen one too many times when he first escapes, and Tommy Lee Jones is like, I want a rating, I want a perimeter. And I just didn't really believe it, but I didn't care. It's so fun. Harrison Ford is such a fucking movie star. He, could have rested on his laurels after Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And his face, especially in this movie, he's always thinking. You're always like, you really believe that he is really thinking, how the hell am I going to get out of this? And that gives so much validity and excitement to this movie.
Yeah, he really has a really strong presence, and I forgot how much I really loved him because I haven't seen him in much lately. I did see him in the most recent Indiana Jones movie, but I hadn't been looking at all of his older movies for a while. I remember I fell in love with him in Witness and Working Girl. Loved him in Working Girl.
Of course.
He has this kind of, I don't want to say like manly quality, but he's kind of manly in a
He's
good
rugged.
way. He's rugged. That's what it is.
But not and a winning asshole, not like an asshole.
He's manly, but not macho.
Yes, and there's something about him that you just do root for him from the get-go.
Yeah. Although one of the things I did like about the film was that you weren't entirely sure if he was guilty or not of the crime at first. For at least a good quarter of the movie, it's all told from his perspective, his memories, the things that he's thinking of. It could have been all, just his manipulation or his trying to cover it up. Also, they kind of handle it pretty stealthily when he breaks down at the beginning when he's getting questioned because he suddenly realizes, oh, they're accusing me of this crime. I'm just upset because my wife died.
Mm-hmm.
So you aren't quite sure, which one is more true.
Also, I love the added little moment that I totally forgot about. He thinks he's coming home and getting laid.
Oh.
The flower petals, and that just makes it even that much more ironic that he was coming back to this perfect marital bliss, and then she's dead. That just does up the personal stakes.
Don't tend to like movies though where people are misunderstood a lot, and it seems really it's painful kind of to watch. The fact that they convicted him in the first place with such little amount of evidence. I mean, his fingerprints were there, but he lives there and he did find her, and I don't know, stuff like that kind of bugs me,
Well, it felt, especially rewatching this in the context of 1993, I thought about that too, and about how this mistrust, as I was watching it, I said, oh my gosh, Waco was just a year earlier, and I think Ruby Ridge was that year, and I wonder if part of the reason why it took off, not only because it's an excellent action movie, but it did tap into the cultural zeitgeist of the law is out to get you, and you didn't do anything wrong, and you're being persecuted. Yeah. And that's where it's interesting about the Tommy Lee Jones character, is he does really start off a villain, and the villain is the law. And Siskel didn't make this point about being personal, but another thing I think why this movie works so well is you do get the personal thing between them in the sewer, and it does have that element of a personal vendetta, not just institution against an individual. And in that way, this movie reminded me of Les Miserables, with Tommy Lee Jones being Javert and Harrison Ford being Jean Valjean.
Interesting.
It did have this mythic quality to it. I really dug it. I was so I remember I was wrong at the time, and I said, well, I'll rewatch it one of these days when the situation presents itself. And lo and behold, here we are recording a podcast, and the situation presented itself.
I think that the way that the police are portrayed is kind of interesting in this film because, they're not bumbling. They're not like in a noir film where usually in noir films, the police are kind of dumb. You're not supposed, in the 1940s noirs, you weren't supposed to actually depict the police in any kind of bad way, but they would get around that by just making them sort of clueless. So they weren't really like that in this. It's also, he kept losing them. So they weren't great.
Yeah.
But they weren't,
they're not great. Yeah, they weren't great at this job.
No, but they tried. Lizzie did not like the way that the police were portrayed in it. She said that she thought they were too inept, it was over the top inept at the beginning.
And that does go back to the idea that it does happen a lot, and the movie is after 2 hours. I'm always like, well, does it have to be more than 2 hours? And this did feel like it repeated the beats a little bit.
I think if you're going to come up with a theme for this movie and kind of tie it to politics of the time or any kind of political agenda, it's definitely anti the idea of just the facts, ma'am. That when you just go by the fact, they kept saying that over and over again, well, if I have to shoot him, he is a convicted felon. They're because he was found in a court of law.
And his line, I don't bargain. It's very, the law is the law. And that's his evolution.
When he says he doesn't care, he's like, I didn't do it. I don't care.
But that's another interesting thing that the movie does, is it does allow his character to develop and evolve, which it didn't have to. And they talk about this more in clip 4.
And there's another thing that's interesting here too, and that is, and this was also the case in Under Siege, Davis apparently feels that just because it's an action picture doesn't mean the audience is necessarily stupid.
Right.
So, for example, there is a transition here in the way that Tommy Lee Jones feels about the fugitive.
It's an evolving character.
It's an evolving character,
Yes.
and it's never spelled out in blunt dialogue. It's done with Jones's eyes,
Yes.
with a pause.
Oh, he's an excellent actor.
With a piece of information that he pauses over, and you get a whole dramatic development there that's really very subtly.
They're definitely getting along better in this episode.
I know. Watching this, we talked about it already with Harrison Ford, but also with Tommy Lee Jones. Having professional actors who know what they're doing, can communicate so much with a glance and a look, and knowing that the audience is there watching, and you don't have to get spoon-fed like so much information.
Right.
Is a reason why I really enjoyed this watch.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's an enjoyable movie. If you like action films, it's a good one.
Yes, and we talked about this a little bit, but I think it is one of those things that it is so skillfully made that you don't have time to stop and start thinking about how the strands might be getting pulled and how it might not make sense. And they talk about this in the next clip.
There are a couple of, I think, things that are not credible in the film. One, a woman picks him up in the middle of the night on the street, that on the highway.
Oh, that would never happen.
Never happen.
Never.
And then later in the picture, I thought at the banquet he should have spoken sooner into the audience because it was safe there.
Yeah.
So other than those two mistakes, I think it's pretty
there were a
perfect
few
picture.
more things that probably weren't credible too, but you have to.
It's a good picture.
Yeah. I agreed with him about that. I was thinking when she picked him up, I was like, what woman would do that?
Right.
Like, and Lizzie thought that maybe she was taking him home, like thinking that he was like she was a prostitute or something like that. And I'm like, maybe, but
let's get real, Miranda. If
Okay.
Harrison Ford was in the street, you would pick him up.
Well, maybe. If I knew it was actually Harrison Ford, for sure.
Oh, he's a stone cold fox, even if it's Richard Kimball.
This is the difference between men and women, though. You might do that and risk it for, cute guy. But I also have to think about, being murdered and all that.
Yeah, well.
I'm not big and strong like you, Dylan. I can't fight them off like...
Well, you'd have to be worried about not being murdered by him, but then being murdered by a one-armed man.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff to worry about in this movie. I do appreciate it. I also do like how often the city is seen as like an evil place in movies of the 80s, but by the 90s, I felt like the cities actually provide some anonymity. And I think it's interesting how when he's on the run, then he starts to see people of different classes and different people outside of his class. And I thought that was yet another way this movie was operating on more levels than it needed to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's for sure. And also he's going back into the city to clear his name. He's going back home to clear his name. One thing though, like again, when you get into your head a little too much when watching it, when he gets away from Tommy Lee Jones, he goes into this parade. You have to suspend a lot of disbelief. Because, it was a really big parade.
It was.
Like somehow. And he also keeps that Dawn green jacket on. And I'm like, why do you keep that on? Just get rid of it,
So when the parade came on, my mind went to, I miss huge crowd scenes with tons of extras.
Yeah.
Now that's something that they're cutting back on. And I see it in so many movies that have huge budgets. I'm like, where are all the people?
Yeah, you mentioned that in Seven Years in Tibet, that like you kind of longed for those big sweeping crowd scenes where it's not just CGI.
Yeah. And that goes to another point, what you say about CGI. This was the same summer as Jurassic Park, and this was kind of one of the last big, huge movies that didn't rely on CGI, at least not overtly. And we talked a little bit about the train crash, and just knowing it was really done and they set it up and it was done in one take does bring a certain authenticity that does make the movie feel more real rather than, oh, this was all done in front of a green screen.
Yeah. Did you ever watch the original show that it was based on?
I didn't know anything about it. Yeah.
So I don't know how much they stuck to that plot line, but because I never watched it either. So
They did a little bit. I think it's also interesting how compact this movie feels. And watching it, I thought this was 4 seasons. They must have lost the thread.
I know. It's like,
And
that was
I had
very
no
strange.
idea, by the way, because when we watched it, I said, why haven't they rebooted this? And apparently they did on Quibi. Who? No.
Were there any famous stars in it?
Oh, Kiefer Sutherland. Yes, Kiefer Sutherland. And I heard nothing about this, but then again, there was a pandemic happening when Quibi launched.
No. Okay. Kiefer Sutherland, you don't really hear much about him lately.
It's
Up and
TV.
down.
You don't hear about a lot of people now because it's harder to hear about something in the lack of a monoculture.
Wow, good point.
Yeah, this was a big thumbs up for me, and this was one of those movies that I liked more on the rewatch.
Yeah.
Which doesn't always happen.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I would give it a thumbs up, but not quite as, big of a thumbs up as you. I mean, since we just did Boogie Nights and I just re-listened to that one, I want to, I think I'm going to start saying, like, this is a very erect thumbs up. It's a flaccid thumbs up for me.
Two other things that bothered me rewatching it
Yes.
was how dare Julianne Moore appear halfway through, which was so exciting, but then I feel like she didn't come back, and I wanted Julianne Moore. I
Yeah.
wanted more, but I kind of always do because she's so great.
Yeah.
And then this felt very 90s, and this is the way it did feel dated to me, was the score was really intrusive, and that felt like a very 90s thing. That was one way that I felt like the movie spoon-fed. I said, this is interesting enough that we don't need the score being like pounding throughout the entire thing.
Did you find the train crash scene to be as exciting as it was back in those days?
Well, more exciting because when I was watching it, I said, oh, the movie broke or the sound went off or something, and that totally pulled me out. I've seen better, but it's good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also what I appreciate about the movie is by the time the train scene happens, it set up the stakes of the character and you're already rooting for him. So it's not just, oh, look at this cool train crash. It has good stakes of the character. Which apparently I said, oh, the screenplay's a little long, but pretty well constructed. But apparently they were writing it on the spot day in and day out. And that surprised me.
Oh.
Yeah, thumbs up for me. Total worth a revisit, especially if you like action movies, and maybe even if you don't.
Yeah. I'd say thumbs up as well. Not as enthusiastically, but it was a good movie. All right. Our next movie is The Wedding Banquet. Also 1993, romantic comedy this time. Directed, produced, and co-written by Ang Lee. It was his second film after Pushing Hands. It's about a Taiwanese immigrant man who is gay and living with his partner in New York City. Let's hear Ebert introduce the film.
Movie, a refreshing change from most of the films we review every week because it's about characters and a subject that are rarely treated in the movies. The name of the film is The Wedding Banquet, and it stars Winston Chow as a gay Chinese American whose parents back home on Taiwan are putting a lot of pressure on him to get married. Well, he's a landlord, and one of his tenants, a Chinese woman artist played by Mei Chen, is so broke and discouraged that she's thinking of giving up. So the man's lover, played here by Mitchell Lichtenstein, proposes a solution.
I have a disclosure to make.
Yes.
My old boss is the co-producer and co-writer of the movie, James Seamus.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
So, full disclosure, but it won't be an issue because I loved this movie.
Yes.
Let's keep going. Phew.
Thank goodness. So, yeah, I saw this movie when it first came out in the theater. I remember I saw it with my really good friend Joyce and absolutely loved it and still love it and have loved it through the years. I've used it in film classes. I used it, I think, in a film class about gays in cinema. And I've used it in a film class when I did Lee and Lee. I taught like 10 different movies by Ang Lee, Mike Lee, and Spike Lee. And this was one of the ones that I showed. I find it to be a very heartwarming, charming movie about not just about the turmoil that people go through having to live an alternate life because they can't be true to their family and come out, but also when you come to America and what that means when you are still part of a culture that is very rich and has so much to offer.
Let's hear Ebert rave about it.
Okay.
Has elements of slapstick comedy in it as the complex scheme unfolds and the two lovers and the, quote, bride, unquote, run around trying to keep all of their stories straight. There were times here when I was reminded of La Cage aux Folles, but there were many more times when the movie found the underlying truth in the scenes, especially as the parents begin to suspect the truth about their son. The movie was directed by Ang Lee, who has taken unexpected characters in an offbeat story and turned them into a funny but also a surprisingly moving film, and this is one of the real sleepers.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I hadn't seen it since the theater. I remember really liking it. I wonder if it hit too close to home since I was in the closet when I saw it, that I didn't ever feel the need to revisit it, but
yeah,
I always wanted to, and I always knew it was really good. And this is a great example of why I love doing this podcast with you, is that it gets me to revisit these movies that I've wanted to revisit and helps remind it just feels like a really true new classic because it is such a good story with such great characters. So often it boils down to that.
Yep. It's a great story, great characters, and very moved. I still was moved by it. That's when the movie really is great to me. It still has that effect on you years later.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I've seen it, I always have that same. I get a little teared up at the end.
I know, I got teared up.
Yep.
It's interesting watching this right after we talked about Philadelphia, because I feel like whereas that one remember we said, oh, that's a movie for the mainstream. This felt like the gay movie for quote unquote us, people who got it.
Yeah.
And
no, it did. It felt very, very with it at the time.
Knowing that there was a big new wave of Taiwanese cinema in the 80s, and Ang Lee came out of that. And seeing this movie as you said, kind of a bridge between two cultures, but also a bridge between Eastern cinema and Western cinema, just really works.
It's also really refreshing to see people acting out of stereotype or acting out of what you would expect of them. Like the parents in this were depicted, they're very realistic seeming parents, but also they're really sweet and kind at heart. You know, like they're good people. And
watching this, I was reminded of what makes a great screenplay is often in this movie. I saw where every single character was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was no one that felt like they were wrong. They all had their different worldviews and their point of views. And the clash between those is what makes great drama and comedy.
Yeah. I had a question for you, though, watching it now through 2024 eyes. I, at the time, thought that it was actually kind of not just with it, but a little advanced for its time in some areas. But I wonder what you thought of when they were at the banquet, you know, when they sleep together. Do you think that was, what are your thoughts about that? Because she says to him, I'm liberating you. What do you think?
I think she really has a crush on him, and he's drunk, and it's a great story point. It complicates the story. He still has this underlying internal homophobia, and it's the totally believable moment, and it's a mistake, and I think he gets wrapped up in the wedding, right?
Yeah.
And this life that he could have had if he was born differently. And it's a moment of drunken, like, why not? I think it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I love it too. And I also love it because it feels to me like it's pushing boundaries even still. So it's not just pushing the boundary of homosexuality, but it's also pushing back at homosexuality. And I mean, they end up, you know, becoming kind of a family.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
But I don't think he's bi. I mean,
no. There's nothing in there that indicates that he's bi. He's probably thinking of something else while he was doing it with her. But baseball bats.
Baseball. Let's hear what Siskel says about it because he loves it too.
Really agree with you. I thought this was a delightful film, and again, it's beyond the comedy of
Yes,
the
it is.
situation. These characters, I'll tell you this, I would love to see a sequel to this, because, and that's the ultimate compliment I always think. I really want to see a sequel because these characters have lives that are so interesting and where they would end up. The family that's brought in, both the mother and the father are written extremely well and as different characters.
Yes,
They're not just parents as a unit. They've been written well. The two Asian characters, the young Asian characters, are both fascinating people and their own lives, and they have their own separate identities. It's very well done.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to see a sequel of it because it's sort
Absolutely not. But I
yeah,
get his point.
no, because sometimes I always think of this movie as being a good example of the magic of film, because you could have all these elements. You could have good writing, you could have good characters, you could have great director and good actors and everything, and beautiful cinematography, and then it doesn't work. You know, like it just doesn't work. Whereas this came together in just the right time, place, and moment that everything did really turn into magic. And I think that if they tried to do it again, they would ruin that magic. Same with Trainspotting. I loved Trainspotting when it came out. That's a magic movie as well. And then Trainspotting 2 is kind of like, the.
Yeah. I don't think you'd actually want to see a sequel, but I do get his point that great characters are ones that feel like they have a past and a future. And we are capturing not slice of life, because a lot happens in this movie, and we are capturing the most important moments of a person's life in a story. And I think that's what nails this. And also, it's a really good story. You know, it moves. Every scene matters. Every character, as I said, has a point of view. And I think that's what I'm learning, is differentiating the classics between movies that we might have liked because we love a star or we have nostalgia for it. These ones that you can keep coming back to have that underlying structure, I would argue.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and it's like a good book that you don't want it to ever end. And when it does end, you're just sad because, you know, you want it to go on.
But also you have that catharsis with the characters.
And it definitely does bring you to that.
They talk a little bit more about East versus West in our last clip 9.
Things about this film is essentially it's a foreign film shot in America.
Yes.
Because it's about a culture and about values that are still straight from China. The two young people who get married are only 3 or 4 years away from China themselves. And then there's the American lover who is trying to relate to the Chinese customs of this family that he's become involved with. And so it becomes a very interesting movie about cultures in addition to being about sexuality.
You could take these characters and run them through any story, and they would be fascinating. It's a real good job of making a fresh film.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, it goes back to eternal themes and universal themes of family and tradition and culture. And that shit ain't ever getting old.
No. It's funny.
It's funny. Yeah.
It's genuinely funny. And also, it's pretty, like you said, that is well filmed. The people are easy on the eyes. I especially liked the girl.
And the boy, Winston Chow, was so cute. Apparently, he was a flight attendant, and Ang Lee convinced him to be in this movie, and then he went on to have a big, successful career in Taiwanese TV.
Huh. I did not know that. That's interesting.
And it's also, like you said, it's pushing boundaries, and I think it is. But it pushes boundaries by also reflecting how a lot of people just live and aren't always portrayed, you know, especially in the early 90s. And this wasn't like a gay couple with a capital G, capital C. It was a gay couple, and they had their issues. And I think that's what also makes it sometimes the boundary pushing movies aren't pushing boundaries, and that's what makes them boundary pushing. Did that make sense? I don't know.
I think so. They're very empathetic towards each of the characters.
Yes.
So they're not like trying to push an agenda. They're not really trying to say, we're going to educate you like they did in Philadelphia. You know, we're trying to tell a story. This is a slice of life. This happened, you know, this is what happens in a lot of families. And, you know, they don't make anyone the bad guy or the good guy. Everyone's complicated.
And like the ending really is beautiful. And no spoilers, because I think a lot of people might be like, oh yeah, that is a good movie and want to rewatch it. But it just gives you enough closure, but also doesn't feel like it's too pat of an ending. So well done.
Yeah. And I actually, when I saw it this time, I was like, I might put it down in my top 20 endings of movies. I think it's that good.
Yeah, I did even. Yeah, I was tearing up watching it. So good.
Same, I mean, Pulp Fiction would also be in that category, but yeah. Anyway, so yes, big thumbs up. Still wonderful. Would totally recommend you watching it again. It's a feel-good film that is really worth it.
I agree. Thumbs up. The boys loved it too. And this does feel like a special section of the movies that we've been looking at. This one is in that top tier. Totally go revisit it. It's great.
Yep.
And so fun to see Ang Lee at the beginning of what ended up being such a monumental and fantastic career. That's another thing I love watching these movies with these baby artists.
Yeah. He ended up being one of my favorite directors, actually.
Yeah.
I love a lot of his movies, a lot. Like Sense and Sensibility, The Ice Storm. These are like Brokeback Mountain. Like these are Life of Pi I really liked.
And pushing boundaries in terms of technology, and some of it worked, like Life of Pi, and some of it didn't, like Billy Flynn's Halftime Walk. But I always appreciated that he's willing to do something new and exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon also. I got to put a plug in for that. That's a great movie.
He does have a great career, man. Eat, Drink, Man, Woman was him?
Yes.
Yes, of course it was.
Yeah, that was that came so right after The Wedding Banquet.
I hope after doing some of these bigger Hollywood movies that he goes back and does a more intimate movie like this, because I feel like he could just remind everyone why he's a master.
Can I ask you one last question before we tie all this up? What do you think it is about the plot of Sense and Sensibility, for instance? How does it tie in to some of his other movies that he's made, like this one, The Wedding Banquet or The Ice Storm? What do you think it is that what's a running theme for Ang Lee?
Sense and Sensibility, that is about people who have certain stations and expectations with family and wanting to follow their heart as opposed to following society. And I think that's Brokeback Mountain as well. And to a certain extent, Crouching Tiger and The Ice Storm, So...
What about
my top line answer?
What about the Hulk, Dylan?
Well, I never saw the Hulk, so I can't comment on that.
Actually, if you think about I haven't seen it either. If you think about like the Hulk idea, that's kind of playing into it too.
Travis is desperate to get in on this.
Someone who's living like a double life,
Someone who really wants to be a green monster and is angry.
Travis was like, "Why didn't they?"
And I'm angry too. Okay, now we come to another 1993 summer special, Manhattan Murder Mystery, written and directed and starring one of our problematic regulars.
Another problematic tour.
Yes, I think I don't know about you, Miranda. I've kind of decided to park all of that shit when we talk about these movies. Although Siskel does talk about it later on, and we'll hear about that. I thought was a very interesting comment in lieu of what's happened since. Anyway, Manhattan Murder Mystery, reteaming of Woody Allen and Diane Keaton from Annie Hall. This was originally an early draft of Annie Hall, by the way. That was supposed to be like Murder Mystery, and then it became Annie Hall. So this was kind of like going to the tape, but going back to OG.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, that was supposed to, it just kind of like through the editing and the acting and everything, Annie Hall kind of became much more about the relationship.
Well, Diane Keaton definitely has an Annie Hall quality about her in this movie. So
yes. And they definitely kind of went back to the well. And I remember seeing it the first time being like, oh, this feels a little bit like a sequel if they ended up together. What else? Oh, the cast of this too. I mean, a reminder of the casts the Woody Allen movies used to get, along with Diane Keaton, Alan Alda, Angelica Houston, Jerry Adler, Joy Bayer making a little surprise appearance. And then, did you see who played the son?
Yes.
Baby Zach Braff.
Yeah, I was gonna say Zach Braff.
Yeah, making a little cameo.
I know. I was like, oh my God.
So, yeah, and it's what it is. It's a Manhattan murder mystery. Here is Ebert introing it in clip 1.
Mystery, and like one of his earlier films, Another Woman, it's about the ways that New York apartment dwellers can accidentally learn strange things about their neighbors. When a little information is combined with a lurid imagination, the result can be unpredictable and even dangerous. In the movie, Alan and Diane Keaton co-star as a married couple who meet the next-door neighbors one day and are surprised shortly afterwards when the man's wife dies of a heart attack.
And then here he is with his thumbs up.
Has the structure and even a lot of the plot twists of a conventional whodunit, but Alan has his own angle on this material. The movie is funny, I think, because the clues almost seem to force themselves upon these amateur detectives, with Woody's character insisting all the way that there has to be a rational explanation, and that in any event, they have no business sticking their noses in where they might get chopped off. The movie is part thriller, part comedy, and part just a funny slice of Manhattan life. I enjoyed it.
I had not seen this since the theater. I enjoyed the revisit. I thought it was fun. I thought it was charming. I'm totally parking Woody Allen, and I thought it was breezy. And this was in between Husbands and Wives, which is a great movie, and Bullets Over Broadway, which is a great movie. So I can see how this felt a little minor Woody Allen, but I was reminded of in this period, and this was kind of wrapping up his long string of hits. But even minor Woody Allen, when it works, still fires on almost all cylinders. What did you think?
I agree. I remember seeing this when it came out, and I loved it at the time, but I was a huge Woody Allen fan anyway. But I was kind of wondering if it was going to age well, and it still put a smile on my face. It's not a great movie, and there are a few parts of it that kind of irritated me this viewing, and that was mostly just him. It was a little bit too much him playing that neurotic type, and also just naysaying everything.
I agree.
Like, you know what I mean? Just objectively, there could have been less of that, and it wasn't him so much as just that kind of incessant, oh no, this is what it could have been. You're crazy, and all this kind of thing that he does. I mean, aside from that, I did really enjoy it the second viewing, and I also am always in awe of, and I know this will probably be controversial for a lot of people, but I'm always in awe with Woody Allen of how much he really makes female characters come alive. Like, he writes good female characters and gives them a lot of characterization and dialogue, and he shares the screen equally with them. And I mean, he could have cast some young ingenue as his wife in this,
Well, you know who it was supposed to be? I mean, one guess.
Mia Farrow.
It was supposed to be Mia Farrow, and then all the shit went down, and then they broke up, and Woody Allen actually said that this was a way to kind of distract him from his personal life. Yeah. And that has that energy to it a little bit, especially watching it now, of like, oh, this is a little diversion from reality. But I enjoyed watching it, especially, in 2024, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Its breeziness it does feel light, and it feels like a little souffle.
Yeah. And I love those kind of mysteries too, those where you come across some information and then you've got to like solve the puzzle, and it seems like it's low risk. Like you're not scared really, but you're intrigued.
Yeah. Let's hear what Siskel thought of it. He was a little bit more in the middle.
Okay.
More in the beginning than as the mystery played out. I think they're funny together, and there are echoes of Annie Hall and their relationship here. And I didn't really care about how the mystery turned out. I was on the cusp on this picture. I'm giving it thumbs up.
I agree that the mystery wasn't that interesting, but it was pretty interesting. But what I really noticed watching it again, and I think why the movie still works, is it really is about the relationship. And I thought of another movie, Rear Window, which is about the murder, but it's actually about Jimmy Stewart's character's fear of commitment. And this is about the murder, but it's really about them fearing that they're an old married couple. And, you have the supporting characters with Alan Alda and Angelica Houston, who's so good in this. And you're right, like her character just jumps off the screen.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I think that's what gives this a story like this legs, is it's not actually about that. And I feel like so many stories, especially these days, are actually about what it's about, and it's more interesting when it's not about what it's about.
It totally has that. It totally has that Hitchcockian kind of. I felt the same thing. Like I was seeing remnants of Vertigo and also Rear Window, like you mentioned. And in a way, like he's sort of using the murder mystery element of it as the MacGuffin, which is what Hitchcock was, very much known for.
Yeah, totally.
So, it doesn't really matter. The mystery. What it's about is a couple that has kind of grown a bit bored with each other, and then they find that they appreciate each other by the end, and that they found this new kind of passion through investigating.
Feels like a comedy of remarriage, as they call it. And it kind of reminded me of, not that I'm that familiar with, but The Thin Man and that type of thing. It was fun.
And weren't they watching The Thin Man in the movie?
I think so. Well, at the end, yes. I think they are watching Thin Man, right?
Yeah. They watched Double Indemnity. They watched The Thin Man. So it's definitely got like these little, winks to film noir.
And the final scene is a callback to The Lady from Shanghai. So I think that's another really fun thing about revisiting it, is he does know his film history and what he's referring to. And it's fun that the movie's not taking itself too seriously.
Yeah. And it has classic Woody Allen, honesty in it, which is always very funny. Like, she takes him to the opera and he basically makes fun of the opera at the end.
Yeah.
For like 5 minutes afterwards. Yeah.
Here's what Siskel said in the next clip, which I thought was very interesting. Clip 4.
Some way rooting for Woody Allen to get his life back together on screen in some way. There's no way I think you can watch his pictures now, at least now, and not have the other world stuff come into it. And I thought he was funnier here than I had seen him in recent pictures, and I liked it on that basis.
Yeah.
It was a reminder that all the stuff that we are talking about now was huge, and people were talking about it in 1993.
Yeah. Yep.
And then after Bullets Over Broadway, he did Mighty Aphrodite, and then he was kind of on a downward trajectory because he makes a movie every year.
Right.
And I think sometimes that's too much. Because I feel like if he concentrated his ideas more, especially in the 90s, then it would have led to better consistency. But I don't know. What am I to say?
Yeah, he had a couple of real good ones and a chunk there, like Match
that
Point.
Was like early 2000s.
And also Vicky Cristina Barcelona was really good.
2008, I think.
Yeah.
Blue Jasmine was okay because it was another great performance.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that Siskel says, I'm rooting for him, because there's that, just kind of reminds you of that automatic kind of wanting to root that was common in the 90s and is still common today. And now there's some pushback. I don't know. I don't want to open this can of worms. I didn't when we talked about Mighty Aphrodite, and I don't want to do it now.
Yeah. I mean, I read an article today that kind of ties into this subject, and then we can drop it. Which it was about Shannon
Let's talk
Doherty.
about it for 4 hours and then drop it.
And then we'll drop it. We really don't want to talk about that, but here I'm going to talk about it again. No, I read this article about Shannon Doherty by Jennifer Weiner, the writer. I'm only bringing this up in light of Shannon Doherty's recent passing. And it was talking about how everybody, just loved to hate her back in the day. And she was always considered to be hard to work with and all these problems. And then when you look back, like now, through the lens of Me Too, it's like, actually, no, she was a normal teenager, because one of the things was she's always late for work. So she's a total like bitch to work with. Well, she was like 17 or 18 years old. And a lot of 18-year-olds are late for things, but because she had this other kind of image of standing up for herself, essentially, she was considered to be a bitch and hard to work with. That's what women were deemed, basically, and still are for the most part, I think, in Hollywood, but it's getting a little bit better.
Is that in
But now
relation
she's-
to, like, you mean Mia? Or
It's in relation to the idea that we defend certain people and we demonize other people.
got it.
So, like, I think Woody Allen was defended because we loved him so much up until then. We couldn't believe that he would be the bad guy in the situation, and Mia Farrow less so, I think, because she wasn't in his high power position. I mean, really, she wasn't a director. She wasn't in as many things, and
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I agree with you that his whole persona has worn thin by this time, and he's actually the weakest part of the movie.
yeah.
But we had been, I don't want to talk about this anymore, but let me make another point about it. But we had been so used to relating to that character and that persona that we weren't ready when it was different, because people are different than they are on screen. And that's something that I don't know if we're ever going to learn.
Well, he also just started making more irritating movies. Like,
Yes.
I think I really appreciated, even at the time, I remember appreciating that he cast Diane Keaton, somebody who was, she wasn't unattractive or anything, but she's, not a spring chicken. One of his friends, basically, he cast her, and that seemed appropriate for, a married couple living in New York City together, that she would be around his same age. After that, I think he did that on purpose because of movies like Manhattan and getting kind of like a little bit of a reputation for, hiring a lot younger women.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, it seems like he did do that. He made a few movies there. There was a definite age gap. And thankfully, he kind of decided to write himself out of the movies eventually, because I think his Woody Allen shtick was getting a little too shticky.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that was better when he wasn't in them later on. That's my 2 cents. We don't have to talk about Woody Allen anymore.
Okay. All right, no more Woody Allen, but he made a movie every year, so it'll come back in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But thumbs up for me. Rewatching it, I was thinking of Only Murders in the Building, and I'm banging this drum again, but this is the type of story I prefer in a short 2-hour, you get the whole mystery, rather than, and I did like Murders for the first season, but without going too much into TV, it's just nice when a story tells the story it has to tell, and then it's over.
Right. Or they know what the ending is going to be when they start the thing, so that they can actually write the story with the ending in mind. Yeah.
And sometimes the ending gets spoiled, like in clip 5. I love this.
It would be a mistake to overlook Jerry Adler's performance.
Very good.
Because he is so convincing as that man that it's very hard for us to believe, and I don't want to give the movie away, which I maybe just did, but it's very hard for us to believe anything bad about him. Let's put it that way.
Boy, and you dumped on me for The Crying Game when it was 18 weeks in release. This movie hasn't even opened yet, and you're a bad boy today, Mr. Ebert.
Yes, I am.
You're a bad girl today, Miss Broder.
Oh my God, he gave away The Crying Game? I didn't know that.
I think they did, because they did that a special episode, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. So that's that was putting his foot in his mouth a little bit.
You're a bad boy, Mr. Ebert.
You're a bad boy. Yeah, I give it a thumbs up as well. I think it's worth revisiting. If you like Woody Allen movies, or you like very light mysteries, this is a good one.
You might be a bad boy, Mr. Allen, but we liked this movie. Thanks for listening to Back at the Movies. I'm your host, Dylan Wilcox.
And I'm your host, Miranda Broder. You can find us on social and Letterboxd at BATMPOD, Back at the Movies, Pod. We'd like to thank our producer, Travis Bone, and Jay Edwards for the original music.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please give us 2 thumbs up by rating us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen. That's our show, and until next time, the balcony is still closed.